Few people have the courage to admit it, but I'll say it straight up, not every family is good for you. And more than that, some families make us sick. Silently, gradually, with soft words that cut like a razor, with demands disguised as affection, with a love that comes bundled with guilt, fear, and obligation. And we grow up believing this is normal, that if it hurts, it must still be love. But what if it's not? What if that voice that belittles you, pressures you, emotionally manipulates you, is in your home, in your blood, in your story? What if you're losing yourself trying to be what they expect of you? It's hard to think this way. Really hard. We're taught from a young age that family is everything, that it's sacred, that it should come first. And maybe it does, but at what cost? Because some people carry their family like a trophy, when in reality, it's a shackle. People who smile in Christmas photos but cry in the bathroom after lunch. People who are taught to be strong but only learn to swallow pain, to hide sadness, to stay silent to keep the peace. But forced peace isn't peace. It's oppressive silence. It's emotional illness disguised as harmony. And that's what we're going to talk about here. About what no one has the courage to say out loud. About the toll of being the pillar of the house. About the fear of disappointing those who raised you. About how hard and necessary it is to break free without cutting ties completely. Because yes, it's possible to set boundaries with respect. It's possible to walk away without hatred. It's possible to choose yourself without becoming cold. But this path requires courage. It requires clarity. And above all, it requires love. Love for yourself, for your own sanity, for your own life. Because sometimes, walking away is exactly what saves the little mental health you have left. This video isn't for those who are afraid to face truths. It's for those who are tired of justifying themselves, tired of getting sick inside just to maintain the image of a perfect family that never existed. It's for those who need to hear that they're not alone, that they're not crazy, that they're not ungrateful, and that, yes, there's a way out. There's a way to take a deep breath, take a step back, and still maintain connections, but healthy, light, genuine ones. And that's exactly what you'll find here. An intimate, unmasked conversation about how to reconnect with yourself, even when the ones hurting you most share your last name. Some people believe family is synonymous with peace, but what if it's not? What if the ones hurting you aren't outsiders, but sit at the same table as you? Most people struggle to admit this. It's almost like betraying an invisible code of honor, as if talking about what hurts us at home is a crime against those who raised us. But what if the silence is slowly killing your peace? What if this sacred love is also the source of your anxiety, your exhaustion, your feeling of never being enough? Because there's a stark difference between loving and erasing yourself. And that's where the conversation gets serious. The truth is, many of us grew up learning to put our family's needs above our own. That old narrative of do it out of gratitude, swallow your tears. They did everything for you, shape an entire generation that doesn't know how to say no without guilt. The idea of emotional independence feels like selfishness to those who grew up hearing that the right thing is to give until it hurts. But no one teaches that giving too much can also make you sick. A favor becomes an obligation. Advice becomes disguised manipulation. Care becomes control. And before you know it, you no longer know where you end and others' desires begin. This confusion is exhausting, deeply exhausting. And then comes the worst part, the self-blame. You start wondering if you're ungrateful, if you're being too harsh, if you should endure a little longer. But how much longer can you take? When does emotional exhaustion turn into chronic sadness? Because it creeps in quietly, in small doses of frustration, in swallowed silences, in Sunday gatherings where you smile politely while screaming inside. And no one notices. No one asks if you're okay. Because you've always been the strong one in the family. The one who holds everything together. The one who can handle it all. But even the strong break when they have no one to be vulnerable with. And sometimes admitting that is a first step to saving yourself, even if it displeases those who've grown used to your submissive version. Have you ever stopped to think about the weight of living to prove something to those who should love you unconditionally? When family approval becomes a goal, life turns into a minefield. Every choice becomes an attempt to please. Every step is measured by what will they think of me? The problem is they are the very people who should give you wings, not clip them. And when you live trying to fit into the mold of others' expectations, your soul starts to scream. But it screams quietly, you know? It screams in the form of insomnia, silent breakdowns in the bathroom, an anguish no one sees but that eats away at you inside. Some parents do love, yes, but they love the way they learn to, and it's not always the way you need. Sometimes their love comes with control, emotional blackmail, phrases that sound like advice but cut like a knife. Are you really going to do that? What if it goes wrong? And then you find yourself living a life that isn't even yours, just to avoid conflict. It's like you're stuck in a script you didn't write, playing a role others expect of you. But there comes a time when that script no longer fits. Your soul starts asking for truth. It starts asking for courage. Because pretending to be someone you're not is far more exhausting than disappointing those who never truly saw you. And the worst part is when you blame yourself for feeling this way, as if you don't have the right to want to breathe in peace. But you do. You have the right to set boundaries, to say, this hurts me, to step out of the role of the family savior. Because no matter what they tell you, you weren't born to carry their trauma on your back. Choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's not a sin to walk away from what makes you sick, even if it shares your last name. And it doesn't have to be a complete break. Sometimes it's just about changing the frequency, reducing the intensity, protecting your inner space. And that doesn't need to be explained to anyone. It just needs to be lived. And in that firm silence, you begin to reconnect with who you really are, not the ideal child, not the responsible sibling, but the human being who also needs to be embraced. It's curious how, often, the ones who hurt us the most are the ones who say they're doing it out of love. That phrase should be a hug, but it becomes a chain. And the most dangerous part, an invisible chain. You feel the weight, but you can't explain it to anyone. After all, how can you complain about those who gave you food, shelter, education? But love that suffocates isn't love. It's possession disguised as care. And many parents and relatives don't understand the difference. They think guiding you is controlling you, that protecting you is deciding for you, and that disagreeing is synonymous with ingratitude. This emotional distortion creates lost, insecure adults afraid to live their own lives. And even when they're far away, they remain trapped. There's an entire generation learning the hard way to emotionally free themselves from their parents, not to leave them behind, but to finally walk on their own. But this process hurts. It hurts when you stop asking for advice and start making decisions. It hurts when you stop being the obedient child and become the conscious adult. And most of all, it hurts when you realize you'll disappoint someone and still need to move forward. This is the pain of growth, the pain of symbolic separation. Because maturing isn't turning your back. It's just changing places, stepping out of the lap, and occupying your own space. And that doesn't require anyone's permission, just courage. But this courage doesn't always come all at once. Sometimes it comes in small gestures, declining an invitation you'd accept out of obligation, defending a boundary that's always been disrespected, choosing a career no one in the family understands, or simply starting to say, this isn't about you anymore, it's about me. The guilt comes, of course, but so does a relief that's priceless. A sigh from someone who, for the first time, feels like they're on their own path. And in this process, you realize you don't need to hate anyone to free yourself. You don't need to cut ties to live with lightness. You just need to change how you see yourself within the family, not as the pleaser, but as the one who respects themselves. There's something subtle, almost imperceptible, that happens when you start respecting yourself more. Others get uncomfortable, especially those who've always relied on your emotional submission. It's strange to notice this. You imagine that by standing your ground with clarity, you gain more respect, but often you're met with awkwardness, distance, and even judgment. Wow, you've changed so much, they say, as if growing were in front. But what's really happening is that you're no longer available to be everyone's emotional support. And that shakes structures. Because in dysfunctional families, the one who heals becomes a threat. This kind of rejection isn't easy to swallow. especially when it comes from people you love. But it's important to understand that often they're not rejecting you. They're rejecting your change. They're rejecting the new version of you that doesn't carry everything on their back. The one who sets boundaries. The one who says, I can't right now. And you know why? Because this new version forces them to look at themselves. It forces them to deal with their own wounds, their own neediness, their own lack of emotional responsibility. And that hurts. It's easier to keep the system as it is, where one sacrifices and the others settle. But you weren't made to be anyone's emotional crutch. Not even your mother's, not your father's, not your siblings. And when you understand this, a new freedom begins to emerge. A quiet freedom that doesn't need approval. It's the moment you learn to protect yourself from conversations that destabilize you, from unfair comparisons, from veiled demands, and more. You start practicing adult love, the kind that loves but knows when to walk away, the kind that understands connection isn't imprisonment, that presence isn't submission, and that saying no is often the purest act of love, for yourself and even for the other. It's in this inner space that healing begins. Slowly, yes, but firmly. And it's there that life starts showing you what peace really is. And peace, my friend, doesn't shout. You know when you start pulling away a little and the phone stops ringing? When the invitations dwindle, the looks change, and you start being called cold or distant? That's no coincidence. It's the side effect of starting to prioritize yourself. Because when you're no longer available to solve everyone's problems, they simply look elsewhere. Sometimes, they even try to make you feel guilty about it. They say you're getting full of yourself, that you've changed too much, or that you've left the family behind. But deep down, what happened was just this. You stopped being the family's emotional firefighter. And it's okay to feel an emptiness in this phase. It's normal. You spent so long being needed that you learned to confuse usefulness with love. You thought you'd only be loved if you were useful, helpful, always available. But real love doesn't require constant effort. Love shouldn't come with a performance manual. Sometimes, this emptiness is just space being cleared, so something new and lighter can come in. It's a lonely process, yes. But it's in these moments of silence that you start hearing your own voice. The one that's always been drowned out by requests, demands, judgments. And it starts guiding you, slowly, to a place where you don't need to prove anything to anyone. And in this place, you start to understand what it means to be whole. Not perfect, not unshakable, just whole. An adult who knows their story but isn't a prisoner of it. Who acknowledges the pains of the past, but doesn't repeat the same patterns. That's where the key point comes in. Forgiving without submitting. Loving without erasing yourself. Caring without hurting yourself. Because you don't need to break ties with your family to protect yourself from them. You just need to create a new dynamic. One that respects your limits, your freedom, and your peace. And that requires maturity. A lot of it. Because there will be moments where you'll feel the urge to go back, to please again, to fit into the old mold. But that's when you take a deep breath and remember, you're not walking away. You're just coming back to yourself. The greatest liberation you can experience might be this. Understanding that you'll no longer try to change anyone. The moment you stop expecting your family to understand, support, or validate your choices, something inside you aligns. Because trying to convince those who don't want to listen is like shouting at a wall. It drains you, frustrates you, and in the end, it doesn't help. The truth is, some people aren't ready to change, and maybe they never will be. And that's okay. It's not your mission to save anyone. Sometimes, the greatest act of love is letting others be who they are, even if it means keeping your distance. This doesn't mean you become cold or insensitive. On the contrary, it means you've matured. You've understood that love without freedom is imprisonment. That presence without respect is invasion. That family, when it drags you down, needs to be reevaluated, not idolized. And at this point, the hardest part might be deal with the grief of what you hoped it would be, that idealized, nurturing, understanding family. When it hits you that it never truly existed, except in your hopes, the pain is immense. But it's also liberating, because it's from this emptiness that you build real relationships, with friends, with partners, with yourself. And building all this takes work. It requires relearning what affection is, what respect is, what partnership is. It also requires deconstructing phrases that have been stuck in your mind for decades. It's all in your head, you're exaggerating, you should be more grateful. These internal voices will still appear, especially on days when loneliness hits. But that's when you need to remember the path you're on, a path back to yourself, where peace doesn't depend on anyone's approval, where your worth isn't tied to how much you please or sacrifice, and where you finally start experiencing a love that doesn't suffocate, a light, mature love, and most importantly, yours. There comes a point in life when the question stops being, why is my family like this? And becomes, what am I going to do about it? It's a quiet but transformative shift. You realize that continuing to wait for them to change is like standing in the rain, expecting the sky to apologize. And it won't. Some people won't change. Not for love, not for logic, not for repetition. And then you have to choose. Do you keep getting soaked, or do you find shelter? And sometimes that shelter is yourself. It's the safe place you build within, even after growing up in a home filled with noise, demands, and emotional chaos. You can't keep living as a prisoner of your childhood. At some point, you have to take the wheel and say, from here on out, I choose for myself. Will it hurt? Of course. The pain of symbolic separation is real. It's a strange longing for something that never fully existed. But it's also the beginning of your emotional autonomy. And it doesn't come with fireworks. It comes in the silence of someone who's learned to listen to themselves, in the firm gaze of someone who no longer asks for permission to exist, and in the courage to move forward even when afraid. Because there will be days when it feels easier to slip back into the old role, the nice one, the understanding one, the one who always gets it. But on those days, you need to remember, you're no longer a child trying to please the adults. You're now the adult who needs to take care of your inner world, who chooses who enters, who stays, and who has access to your vulnerability. This doesn't mean building walls, but learning to use doors. Doors you can open or close, with firmness, with clarity, with love. Because, in the end, being family goes beyond blood. Being family is about presence, respect, listening. And if that doesn't exist in your home, it's okay to build it outside. Life has a beautiful way of bringing people into our path who become home. People who embrace, who teach, who share lightness. And you deserve that. You deserve emotional rest. And if that means disappointing a few, so be it.